I'm your host, Dino Watt, and get ready to be inspired as you learn exactly how to own your role. Welcome once again, everybody, to the Own Your Role podcast. I'm your host, Dino Watt, and again, just thrilled to share with you people that I've found who I think can make a huge difference in your life as unique entrepreneurs, people who are, for lack of a better phrase, which we'll get into with Jason in just a moment, trying to dominate the world with their message. And I love it. I'm so excited about that. Before we get into the show, I want to make sure that I thank all of you for sharing this podcast with your friends and colleagues because you found value in it. And thank you all for subscribing and getting those notifications of when a new show comes out, because every episode that we have coming out pretty much every week is there to help support you in your business and your life and touch you in some way. As you know, I always care most about the relationships that we have. Everything I've ever received in my life has come from a relationship that I've created, and everything I will ever receive will come from a relationship, and you all are part of that relationship. So thank you so much for being here. That being said, our guest today is Jason Greer, and Jason is an incredibly dynamic person. And as I mentioned to him before we got on the air, I was reading through his bio when he was submitted to be a guest on the show and went, yep, because you're going to see he's all about relationships. He's all about connections. He's all about teamwork and unity. And I can't wait to share more information and dive in myself to get to know him even more. So I'm glad we get to do that together. That being said, let's get started with the show. Jason, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me on your show. I'm really excited.
I'm thrilled. Jason, I believe that the thing that connects all of us in this world is our story.
Yes.
We hear somebody's story. There's something we can connect to, no matter where you grew up, no matter what your background is. There's a connection of that human experience. So we always start our show off with finding out your story. So we've got your accolades, we got your bios, but who is Jason? I want to know, what is your story?
That's a fantastic question. I always lead my story off with this. I am the son of Dr. Jerome and Elaine Greer, two of the best people I've ever met in my entire life, all 49 years of my life. Obviously, I owe it to them because of my parents, and I love them dearly. I am a dude that decided to dream big. I've been the victim of cross burnings when I was 17 years old.
Wow.
And just as I share with my parent, in terms of my parents, I've been fortunate and blessed to be the son of two tremendous people. But more importantly, I am a guy who's out here legitimately saying to the world, we can do better. Mm-hmm. Just have to do it. So that's my story.
That's amazing. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. So born in 1974 in this really small suburb called Bridgeton. And we only called ourselves a suburb because that's what middle-class people did. And we were aspiring to be middle class. Right? But grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and fantastic life. Yes.
That's funny. I don't know if I've ever really thought about that. I grew up in the desert of California. We called ourselves desert rats. I don't know if I understood what a suburb was until probably college, like college age. I never really went to college. So college age, when I was like, oh, that's what a suburb is. It's outside of, okay. So yeah, I get that. What did you love to do growing up? And were you, when you aspired for dreaming bigger, were you, what were you like in high school?
Man, well, let me say this. What was I like growing up? I was the biggest nerd you will ever meet. I was just as my friends would describe me, I was this short, chubby black kid with a big afro, thick glasses, and always had a comic book in my hand because I love comic books.
Interesting.
Grew up as an only child, and the environment that I grew up in. So we were one of 3 Black families in the entire community, which the Black families knew each other very well because we'd hang out. We'd hang out on the weekends. Our parents would hang out on the weekends, and I'd hang out with the other kids. But I was the only boy, so I was always sort of the outlier. And then in the greater community, which was all white, I was just this kid trying to make sense of the world, right? And in high school, my freshman year, I joke about this, my freshman year. So I grew up in Bridgeton. So I went to St. Lawrence the Martyr Catholic School, which was part of this Catholic parish. I was born and raised Catholic. And I had worn uniforms from grade 2 through grade 8. I had
Wow.
no sense of fashion other than Miami Vice because I thought Don Johnson, Sonny Crockett, I think his name was the coolest cat ever.
Yep.
So when I was going to my high school, which was completely different than my grade school was 99.9% white. My high school was 70% African American.
Oh,
So I had no idea how to dress. My mother had no idea how to dress me outside of uniforms. So I looked at my mom. This was the weekend before my first day at Luther North. I said, Mom, I got to get my Miami Vice on. I got to dress like Sonny Crockett because I think that's what people like, right? So we went to, Jacques Penney, which is also known as JC Penney, right?
Jack
And
Bentley.
right, found the outfits that were closest to Miami Vice without my understanding that people weren't dressing like Sonny Crockett anymore, especially Black folks,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Walk in my freshman year, walk in the first day of my freshman year, and this guy named Bernard Croft, and I don't even know where Bernard is to this day, but I'll never forget Bernard. He sees me, he looks at me, he goes, "What's up, man?" And my response to him wasn't, "Hey, what's up, my brother? How you feel?" My response to him was, "Hey, good morning. How are you? I hope you have a fantastic day." And I'm walking down the house like, high school ain't that hard. Man, a month later, here I am eating lunch by myself in front of
Mm.
my locker because the teachers felt sorry for me because nobody would sit with me in the
Yep.
lunch, right? And but what I had to my advantage was that I was a fantastic athlete, in addition to the fact that I was just a really nice guy. So I go from being this outsider, right, my freshman year to being homecoming king and prom king by my senior year. And
Wow.
I'm proud to say, as of October 14th, 2023, I was inducted into my high school's Hall of Fame. So
Wow.
yeah, incredible story. I was very proud to be able to publicly honor my parents for everything that they'd done for me in my life, and had about 40 of my family and friends that were there for the event. It was amazing, amazing time.
A Hall of Fame in your high school. I got to get on a phone call with my high school man and be like, "What's up? Like, we need to have a Hall of Fame. I want to be inducted in
Exactly.
that thing." That's.
Exactly. You should be the first person to be
I
inducted.
said that be like, I'm gonna start it up. I'm gonna be like, you know
Right.
what? I think we need this, and I'll be the first inductee. And
Exactly. I'll make
wow,
the sacrifice.
that's a big deal. You got a Hall of Fame for the high school. Wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome. When you were what do you think made the transition, the shift from the freshman year of sitting by yourself to homecoming king and all that? What was it that you did that made it not a torturous 4 years, but
Yeah.
actually a successful one?
I leaned into the mission of my high school, Lutheran High School North, which I'm very proud. We're proud Crusaders. And I know that people don't necessarily like to use the Crusader tagline these days,
Uh,
given the historical connotations of it. But I leaned into what it meant to be part of something bigger than myself. And it's interesting you asked that question because I learned at an early age, and my father really instilled this in me. He said, people will work for money, but they'll die for respect and they'll die for recognition. But
mhm,
it's your responsibility to find out how people want to be respected and how people want to be recognized. I didn't know what that meant other than it was my responsibility to get to know people.
mhm,
And as I started to get to know people, I found that we had a lot in common. There were some people I had stuff in common with, there were people I had nothing in common with. But I just really went about getting to know people because I was an only child. And my relationships outside of my parents had to begin and end with me. So I went from being this kid who was completely ostracized to finding out that I was part of a bigger family, because that's really the mission of Luther North, is that we are crusaders, but we're a very proud family, an
mhm.
extended family of people who graduate from Luther North in 1960 and will graduate from Luther North in the year 3000, right? Hopefully it'll still be around. But really getting involved in that mission. But then I loved playing ball. I loved football. I loved
Mm.
baseball. I sucked at basketball. I defeated every got ever created. Right? I was a 6'3" African American man that could not play basketball to save my life. Right. But between football and baseball and just really having some fantastic teachers and having some fantastic friendships, that's what was really my shift.
Wow. Your parents, you put a lot of emphasis on your parents, which I think is so amazing to hear. I personally I credit my parents for teaching me all the things not to do, right? Like I joke about every once in a while. I think I said this on a podcast yesterday of I've earned a lot of money from my parents' divorce. Like, it was traumatic when I was a kid, but I learned a lot of what not to do. And now I have a marriage, you know, that we're going on 30 years this year. And like, I
Yep.
love my wife. She's amazing. And that's that's what I credit to my parents too. That you credit a lot of your personality, your drive,
Yeah.
your blessings to your parents. Where did they get that from? That they were like, "Ooh, we're going to instill this in our son." Was it your grandparents, or was this something they had to kind of do a generational change to as well?
Yeah, great question. I think it was on the case of my father, it was definitely the grandparents.
Oh, nice.
My grandma and grandpa Greer, you're talking about, and my father's 86 years old at this point. My mother's 81. So do the math.
Mm,
But you're talking about a, you know, proud black man and proud black woman in the form of my grandparents who had their own farm. And my father was one of 9 kids. He was the baby of 9 kids.
wow.
They grew up picking cotton. They grew up, following behind mules. They grew up working the land.
Mm,
And so my grandfather, who only had a third grade education, he was insistent upon every single one of his kids getting at least a master's degree, at least a master's degree.
wow.
And in order to teach a lesson to his kids about how valuable it was to read and to be studious, he would sit at the kitchen table and he would read his newspaper. The challenge was my grandfather was illiterate. So he had no idea that the paper was upside down.
Wow.
But instead of making fun of him, they took the lesson of we get where daddy is going with this. And that's what my father called his father. It was daddy. We get where he was going with this. And I'm proud to say that, with the exception of one aunt, all of my aunts and uncles had at least a master's degree, and my father had his PhD, right? And you're talking about a generation of people who were not allowed to go to historically white colleges,
Mm-hmm.
but they were taught, because they went to historically black colleges, they were taught by the best and the brightest that the black community had to produce,
Yeah.
right? And so my father just grew up with this mentality of education was the key, work ethic is the key, and showing up is the key. Now you have my mother on the other side. My mother was an orphan. My mother was, my grandfather, I think my mom is one of 16 kids. 8 of them are full brothers and sisters, and the rest are half brothers and
Mm,
sisters. And my grandfather was out there doing whatever my grandfather was doing. And I'm not going to judge because he's my grandfather.
mm-hmm.
And my grandmother loved her kids tremendously, but she had tuberculosis. And that was back in the day when you were put in an iron lung.
Yeah.
So all the kids were divvied up. And my mother grew up with my grandma Chubby and my pop, or my great uncle, great aunt. And they loved my mom. They loved her dearly, but they taught her how to work.
Mm,
My father, when they met, my parents dated for 4 months before they got married. 4 months.
wow.
You have my father, who was a grade school principal, my mother, who was a nurse. She was an LPN, licensed practical nurse. And they just have this work ethic that my mom is 81 years old. She's been retired for the better part of 10 years and still gets up every morning at 4 a.m. to clean the house. And you have my father, who had this fantastic educational career. I mean, he retired as assistant superintendent of the Peoria School District, District 150. And even to this day, my parents are they're workers, but they
Wow.
study. They're about education. So that's where I really got it from. I had no choice but to be successful, because it would have been a slap in their face, a slap in the face of my ancestors, had I been otherwise.
I'm having a bit of a moment here as you're talking, because I'm just finding it so inspiring and proof about the power of your mindset
Yes,
versus
sir.
circumstance. Because as you talked about your father and your grandfather, and you mentioned the illiterate thing, I actually recently found out through for Christmas last year, we gave my parents that, I don't know if you've seen the pop-up of the ads where you can do like Storyworth, and your parents get a question sent to them every month, and they answer the question like, what was your first car and what was your first job? And so you get a history of your parents. And through that, I found out that my grandfather, my mom's dad, was illiterate, had zero education, and took that and actually made that a negative, right? Like my mom, he learned how to be a bartender. That was his only job he could have after getting out of the war. And he took that to an extreme where that's what he would serve my mom alcoholic drinks at 8 years old, right? Type stuff.
Oh, wow.
They went down a path of negative things, thinking this is our lot in life. Too bad for us. They're not great people. My mom had to come out of those ashes and figure life out. And it was because the mindset they had. Your parents had a mindset, grandparents had a mindset of, nope, this is what we're going to expect. This is the level of expectation we have, and everybody will rise to that. Even if I don't have that. Grandfather doesn't know how to read. He's doesn't accept that as everybody else then can have an excuse. It's rising up to it. It's really like hitting me in a big way emotional as you tell that story, because I appreciate the power of the generational change that is made through a decision, not through a circumstance.
I love what you just said, through a decision, and a decision that's made every single day.
Yes.
And I think that's the key. I think so many people wait for that aha moment as though this is a movie, right? Yep. Where all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, you just make this radical mental shift, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden, your life becomes so much better. You're talking about, let's say in the case of my father, you're talking about farmers in the segregated South,
yes,
Tennessee, who, in the case of my grandfather, and I'm going to brag on my grandfather here, Grandpa Greer, who legitimately said, you are not what people call you. You are what you believe you are. And so we have this thing in my family where we are so proud to be Greers. And people are going to say it's arrogant. People are going to say it's cocky. You're damn right it is.
Yes, it's a badge of honor.
Because society says I shouldn't be where I'm at today. Right?
Yep.
I'm the descendant of slaves. And I'm here saying to you, I am as successful as they come. I'm as proud as they come. I am the son of Dr. Jerome and Elaine Greer, but I'm also the grandson of Albert and Augusta Greer. Help but be proud of where I come from. In the case of my mother was given nothing. And my mother worked her butt off to become what she became. You're talking about a nurse, a licensed practical nurse in St. Louis during a time where they had just desegregated the hospitals. So you had patients who wouldn't allow the quote unquote N-word to take care of them. You had doctors who wouldn't allow the quote unquote N-word to help them.
Yeah.
Mother kept showing up every single day. And here's the thing, St. Mary's Health Center, which is a hospital that she worked at for 30, 35 years. I went back and I had the honor of going back as a consultant to do a bunch of training as well as employee relations engagements.
Wow.
And it so happened when I was there. So it's like deja vu. I walked through this hospital as an adult, a hospital that I walked through when I was a kid. Just so happened to come across a couple of nurses who worked with my mom.
Wow.
They didn't know it was me, but then I introduced myself and they said, are you any relation to Elaine Greer? And I said, I'm her son, Jason. And they legitimately sat there. This happened, I was there for 2 weeks, so probably 6 instances where this happened, where they shared story after story after story about how hard my mom worked, how much she loved her patients, even when they didn't love her, and how you always knew that life was going to be okay, no matter how chaotic the hospital environment got, because Elaine was there with her bright white uniform and her clean white shoes, because my mother was always clean no matter what. How can I not be proud of where I come from when I come from that?
That's amazing. That's amazing. Right? Yeah, it's great. And like you said, it was the daily decision for that mindset. Yes. And with what you do now, I gotta assume, because I see it too, but I gotta assume, I mean, you're talking about leadership. You help people really understand the power of leadership.
Yes.
When we see, unfortunately, I think in the workforce now, sometimes we have people who don't look at I have to make that decision every day, no matter what the circumstance is. If my boss is not as kind to me today, then that gives me the excuse to not do my work fully, or what they find the excuse of whatever it is. What are you seeing as someone who's out there so much in the space of leadership, work, teamwork, as one of the biggest challenges when it comes to that daily mindset of like, I'm responsible for my mindset today? What do you see as one of the biggest challenges out there right now?
Lack of purpose.
Mm,
Part of the man, let's talk here,
yeah.
right? I'm assuming, are you Gen X, millennial?
Yeah, I'm Gen X.
So Gen X, so I'm 49 years old, proud Gen
Yeah, I'm
X.
50.
No,
Yep.
nobody cares about us.
Yeah.
They talk about the baby boomers, they
Mhm.
talk about the millennials, they talk about Gen Z. Nobody talks about us,
Yeah.
right? We didn't grow up with iPhones. We didn't grow up with the tech, various things of technology. But I'm going to speak to myself, but I grew up with this sense of I have a responsibility to my family to be great.
Mm,
And even when I'm not treated adequately.
yeah.
Today, what I'm seeing with more and more employees, and I'm going to say more organizations as a whole, because I'm not just going to pin this at the feet of the employees. I'm
Yeah.
going to say the organization as a whole.
Great.
We are so good at getting the products, goods, and services out, but we're not very good about engaging people with the bigger picture. And when I say the bigger picture, I don't care if you're the janitor all the way to the CEO. If you don't understand what the mission and vision of your work is and how it correlates to the success or the lack of success to the organization, then you're just a W-2 employee who shows up every single day, does his or their job, and you leave.
Yep.
So what I see with employees today is, why should I care about the organization when the organization doesn't care about me?
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side of that, you and I have talked about a little bit about the lessons we learned from our parents.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, a lot of young folks sat back and watched their parents who worked these jobs for 50 or 60 years and were retired with a little bit of nothing, with broken down bodies and a gift certificate to Starbucks
Yeah.
as their retirement gift.
Yeah.
And wait a minute, I didn't even see my mom and dad every single day because they're too busy giving their blood, sweat, and tears to company ABC. And that's what company ABC did for them. Why am I going to give myself to an organization that won't give itself back to me? So that's what I see a lot of.
I agree. I think that we also in our generation, we're given a bit of the gift of, for the first time in a generation or an entire generation, seeing that I don't necessarily have to work 40, 50 years with a company to get the gold watch at the end, or the Starbucks gift certificate. I
Yes.
can actually expand on that and make a different choice and be an entrepreneur or find out another way. I can switch jobs to find something that actually connects with me. And
Yes.
I feel like in some ways, the generations after us maybe have taken that a little bit for granted. And
Mhm.
so therefore, I hate using the word spoiled, but they don't recognize, oh, this was an option. So the choice to have every single day, to be able to make a different decision, to be able to say, oh, this doesn't work out for me, I'm going to make it better because I want to make it better for me. I don't
Yes.
need them to make it better for me, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not going to.
Agreed. Agreed. You're talking about choice here,
Mm.
right? And I give this example. So I was in Puerto Rico, actually just got back, and one of the things that amazed me was, and maybe it made me feel old, and maybe I'm just telling myself here. I'm looking at these beautiful cultural sites and I'm taking it in. I'm not taking photos, I'm taking it in. And I look to my right and I see a man holding a camera while a woman poses, however that woman happened to pose. I'm not going to describe it,
Sure.
right? In front of this landmark. I look to my left and I see this man posing in such a way that I'm not going to describe, right? While his lady, I assume it's his lady, takes his photo or takes his video. And I realize that ingenuity from the past has been replaced by narcissism today.
Mm.
And anybody and everybody says, I can be an influencer by getting more likes. I can be an influencer and maybe that way I can make more money, right? By posing, by doing something dumb, by, encouraging people to like my stuff. Well, that's an externally driven mission. if we're spending so much time on the external, how much time are we spending on the internal, making those internal decisions that says, I'm going to get up every single day and I'm going to work my butt off to achieve something. Not only for likes, not only for clicks, but because I'm speaking for my family, because I'm speaking for my bloodline, because I'm speaking for
Legacy.
Legacy.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Listen, that
yeah,
needs to be on a bumper sticker. Inspiration from the past is replaced by narcissism of today.
oh, dude, yes. I mean, gosh, it's painful to me because my father would say this to me. He goes, I don't have a problem with anybody in this world other than someone who's lazy. And and I would ask, why is that, Dad? Because I want to hear the rest. And he goes, because they're a waste of breath.
Mm.
You consider, I'm reading this book, I think it's called 4,000 Weeks. And it's basically talking about time. And I often feel like I don't have enough time because there's so much, you asked me the question, what do I want to accomplish 2024? And I go and I said world domination in 365 days, right?
Yeah.
I feel like there's just so much that I want to do. But when you really boil it down, we're only here for 4,000 weeks on average. That's not a lot of time. So if the time that you have here, sir, is precious, then you better ride this sucker with everything that you got.
Yeah.
You read more, you learn more, you have discussions, you open yourself up to other people, you get involved in your religion if you believe in a religion, you get involved in your atheism if that's your thing. You live a life that has more to do with substance, however you define substance, and less to do with what does everybody think about me? Because I'm guilty of that. I worry so much about what people think about me, only to find out, my brother, they ain't thinking about me.
Mm.
They think about me when I'm face to face with them, but I guarantee you half the time when I'm talking to them, they're thinking about something else related to them, not to me.
Yep.
So if you only have this limited amount of time, and look, my friends get on me, my family gets on me because I don't sleep a lot, because I'm always on the go. But I'm like, I'm 49 years old. I turned 50 on February 13th. That means on average, I only have maybe about another 60 more years to live.
Yeah.
There's a lot I got to
That's
do.
right. That's how I feel. That's when I hit my 50th birthday. I was like, hey, I got 50 left. What am I doing? Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
So with all of this legacy, inspiration, duty, how did you come to find your sweet spot of message around leadership? And I love the phrase you have of what's your story, right? Because like I said at the beginning, I think that's what connects us all. So how did you find this inspiration and the, if you will, the framework that you work within when it comes to you and your clients?
Great question, brother. And a series of great questions. Seriously, you're really good at this. Social work. So I have a master's degree in social work from Valparaiso University, a master's degree in social work from Washington University in St. Louis, and a master's degree in human resources management from the University of Illinois. Social work legitimately from age 18, I think, when I started at Valparaiso University to this very day, has been the framework by which I do most everything. And it's interesting being this, they call me the employee whisperer. It's trademarked now. And it's not a name that I created. It's something that my clients would refer to me as they refer me to other clients, right? Other potential clients. And so the employee whisperer framework, really, I can give you a bunch of buzzwords that sound really good in a corporate setting. No, it's social work, dude. That's what it is. And the byproduct of social work, one of the core tenets of social work is self-determination. But you cannot make a decision for what's right for you until you know the options. And that's how I go about, dealing with my clients, dealing within this world of corporate America. I'm not someone who came up with a business with business experience. I'm not somebody that came up knowing all the business jargon. I had to learn by trial and error and basically get my butt beat. But what I did know bringing into it was nobody else was doing social work at this level. So I decided to do it, and it's worked tremendously for me.
So when you and I appreciate that, because when I think of social work, my stepmother is a social worker, and I think of, the case files that she has and the processes she goes through. I hear a lot of the busy work. I don't hear a lot of the inspirational side of things. So I really like that reframing of what social work is, working socially with people, right? And getting to know them. How did you start to really look at the brain side of things, right? The function of the brain and how it helps us or stifles us, depending on how you look at it. How have you
Yeah.
how'd you get into that?
Yeah, so my mentor, Phil Dixon, is he's actually the co-author of our book, Bias, Racism, and the Brain, which is really our response to the tragic assassination of George Floyd.
Mm.
And Phil was the one that introduced me to it. And how that came about, I had a client who, long-standing client at this point, who called me one day and said, we have some racial issues that are going on in one of our facilities, and I need you to come in to address it. I said, sir, I appreciate that, but I'm not a diversity guy. At this point, I was doing absolutely no work in diversity. And I go, I have no idea what I'm going to say other than we should all get along, right? And I go, and he goes, well, just come in, just talk to the employees, do some training. He goes, just do me the solid. Been a great client of mine. And I said, and I asked him, I go, why are you calling me? And his response, because this guy was pretty frank, he goes, you're the only black guy that I know. So can you come in and fix it? And I was like, cool, right? But I'm sitting there sweating. Blessedly, this was not a virtual call. I'm sitting there sweating, and I called Phil, told him what was going on, and he asked me, what is my brain saying? And I go, what do you mean, what is my brain saying? My brain is saying, don't do it. And he goes, no, what is your brain saying to you? And then I started to share some of the stories that were going on in my mind. And those stories were, you suck. You're going to fail. You can't.
Mm.
Don't do it. Don't get on the plane. Don't embarrass yourself.
Imposter syndrome.
Well, imposter syndrome. But as I'm sharing the stories, he goes, and this is exactly why I'm going to help you create a diverse brain training that's centered around diversity,
Mm.
because our brains are consistently telling us a story about the outside and the internal world, our internal world. And 99.9% of what your brain is telling you is not the truth, because your brain is designed to keep you safe.
Mhm.
And so over the course of 4 hours, Phil and I created this training, which has now become Diversity in the Brain. What's your story?
Mhm.
And he helped me to, this is the early, the genesis of it. I legitimately stood in front of this group. I think I trained maybe about 300 people over the course of 5 days. And I took people through the reward versus the threat state, and our in group versus our out group. The reward state says, when I'm in the presence of somebody who looks like me, talks like me, thinks like me, therefore they're me, I feel good. Dopamine courses through my brain, through my body. It's the feel good hormone. That's how you feel when you're in the presence of somebody who's a member of your in group. Contrast that when you deal with somebody who doesn't look like you, doesn't think like you, doesn't talk like you, therefore they're not you. I go into the threat state, which is the cortisol effect, where the cortisol is the stress hormone, where you get into one of two states. You either fight or you flee. That's what it's like when I'm dealing with somebody who's in my out group. So what I did was I took a group of people who looked completely different from one another, and I said, let's start breaking down the basic fabric of who we are as human beings, because we spend so much time in diversity talking about the surface level, the social drivers, the things we can touch in terms of skin color, the things we can see in terms of hair color, the things we can see in terms of whatever else. But we don't do enough time talking about the brain drivers, which is our social generalization. We don't spend enough time talking about our DNA and our genetic structure. We don't spend enough time talking about the stories that have been passed down through generations, because we don't quite understand why I don't feel comfortable around people who are not like me. So we instantly say, well, it's because they're black. No, it's because you just haven't had any dealings with them. And so that's where that whole brain perspective came from. So I took that and started to really marry that into the world of employee relations, into the world of labor relations. And we come from the perspective of, if I'm dealing with a group of employees who are looking at me like, who are you? What are you doing here? And why haven't I gotten my raise? It's my responsibility to move them from a threat state, from a brain perspective, from a threat state to a reward state. So they not only start to hear me, but now I can help them to recenter themselves within the mission of the organization by helping the organization recognize how they fail these employees and how they can get these employees back.
It's amazing because the stories that we tell ourselves are continual, right? Like you just, even the example you just gave of the employee or the employer who's thinking this person just wants a raise, or this person said this one phrase this one time, so that's stuck in my head, and now I've decided who they are, what they're thinking, and I've created a story about them, which is happening on the opposite side too, from the employee to the employer. And I'm going to go all the way back to you telling us a little bit about yourself and you being the biggest nerd.
Yes.
Right? When you talk about being the biggest nerd and having a comic book in your hand every day, that's like, oh, we've opened up a whole new understanding of who Jason is and how we can relate to one another, or somebody who's listening going like, oh, me too. And all of a sudden it does take away the visual or physical barrier that we assume, and allows us to see a person who is like-minded because
Yes.
of a commonality that we have. And that's why I care so much about the story that we're going to tell ourselves. If I'm going to make up a story about whatever, why don't I make it favorable for myself and everybody else? It's just a story. It's not
Yes.
truth. It's story.
Well, it's funny you said that because, going back to the visual of, this short kid with, thick glasses with a comic book under his arm. Since I didn't have an older brother to look up to, I didn't have an older sister to look up to, and I didn't have anybody in my community that looked like me. I just had comic books.
Mm-hmm.
And my father, when he was working on his PhD, he truly believed that you could teach kids how to read by using alternative methods of education. And I was his first guinea pig, so to speak. And he taught me how to read, I think at age 4, because I didn't really start talking until maybe 4 or 5. So let's say 5. He taught me how to read by introducing me to the Incredible Hulk.
Oh.
And associating pictures with words, therefore I could read, but it also taught me how to read people's visual expressions, the verbal expressions, the nonverbals. And so I started to visualize in my mind, all right, so you have all these kids who are making fun of me. They used to make, God, dog. They would talk about the way I looked, the way I walked. I was pigeon-toed. They would talk about my hair because I was like an alien to them. But I could imagine myself not through their lens, but through the lens of my imagination. I look like Superman.
Yeah.
Like Batman. I look like Black Panther before Black Panther was popular. I look like Luke Cage. So you're talking all of these, big, muscular superheroes. And I started to fashion myself internally like I was that superhero. And now we're talking about the biology of belief. My father's only 5'7". My mother's only 5'3", but I'm 6'3", 245 pounds.
What?
Just did an in-body test. I think this in-body analysis with your musculature and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So 243 pounds, I'm 10.6% body fat.
Wow.
I'm 39 years old and have the metabolic range of someone who's 32. I'm bringing that up, not as a matter of gloating. I'm bringing that up because it's the biology of belief, because I had to fashion myself in my mind as a superhero, because if I didn't, those boys and girls who made fun of me would have crushed me. So I had to believe in something bigger than them. I had to believe in something bigger than their words. And that has stayed with me my entire life.
Wow. Well, you lost me on the 6 foot or the 10% body fat part, because mine was Daredevil. I was a big Daredevil fan because he was blind, right? But he used his senses and all that. And I having a name like Dino in the 70s in California with jacked up teeth, and I was smaller and shorter than everybody else, fatter than everybody else, like that. Daredevil was my guy. I never got to the 10% body fat thing. I should have looked at that a little more.
But you succeeded though. But you're out there killing it, just like Daredevil's out there.
That's right. I'm still using my senses.
Right.
I'm there. Wow. How do you, so let's talk about your business and the business model that you've created and how you got there. You talked about working with the hospitals. You talked about different businesses that you get to go into. When you're thinking of your business and you're putting it out there, who's your ideal client that you love to work with, that you feel like you're able to make the biggest impact with your message?
Oh man, I know I sound like a broken record, but great question. My ideal client is somebody who has the good of the organization at heart. I
Mm,
don't care how bad. Look, I get thrown into the worst messes God ever created because people know that my reputation is that I fix stuff quickly. So give me an organization, give me a set of leaders, or even a leader who wants to do something positive, even in the midst of a dumpster fire.
hmm.
That's my ideal client.
Nice.
Somebody who will allow me to get in front of their employees, will allow me to get in front of their managers, will trust me enough to listen to my voice and my years of experience, and will trust me enough to actually follow through on the recommendations I present. That's my ideal client.
That's great. And it's so necessary, I think, in our world today to be that type of leader. You're going to get so much more out of your team members and out of the longevity of you being a leader and an effective leader when you go into any type of situation with that mindset, and having someone like you to be able to say, well, let me show you even how you can get more mileage out of that mindset, that belief system is crucial. You just, I mean, I'm just so edified by so many things that you talked about today, as you notice. And I think people who listen to the podcast, you know, yep, you have your business, and we can go through the business of, the keynote leadership and Greer consulting and all that. But thank you for letting us know who you are as a person. You're really owning your role as a thought leader, as a societal leader, as someone who has broken those, I'm sorry, has continued on with the legacy that your grandparents gave. I mean, that's so inspiring there.
Thank you, my brother.
What's your message to the world?
We can be so much better than what we allow ourselves to be. I know that you are stuck in a myriad of things. Divorces I've gone through too. Right?
Mhm.
So I get it right in some respects. I get it wrong in other respects. Don't judge me. It's part of
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
Um, we go through challenges with our kids. We go through challenges with our colleagues. We go through challenges within relationships. But we can be so much better because that is the human experience.
Mhm.
But don't lose faith because we live in a we live in a cynical age.
Yeah, we do.
We have more today than our ancestors could have dreamt of ever having.
Mhm.
And it's almost an embarrassment of riches.
Mhm.
But one thing that we don't have is that we've lost hope. And please don't stop hoping because our kids need it, but you need it too. Just be better.
100%. Wow, love it. You can see why you're the employee whisperer, right? Because you're talking to people who are people, and they they need someone who can hear them the way that you hear them and show them a path. So I love that you're not just focused on the leader, but there's the employee side of it, that team member side of it, that human in front of you side of it, which is so powerful and
Thank you.
grateful. Man, thank you for edifying us today. Thank you for all the wisdom that you shared with us today. As we wrap things up in every episode, we first of all, I want to make sure people know how to get a hold of you. So let's do that first. Where can people reach out to you, get more of Jason, have you speak at their events, train their teams? How can they do that?
Yeah, you can reach me on Instagram at jason.greer, LinkedIn, Jason Greer, on Twitter, or excuse me, X, it's at Labor University, or you can go to my website, which is a great way to find me, hiregci.com. I'll say that one more time, hiregci.com.
Love it. Love it. Love it. As we wrap up, we ask every one of our guests 4 specific questions around own your role. It's the ROLE part of it. And they're just off the top of your head, rapid fire type ideas, but would love to get you to play. You're willing to play?
Let's rock.
All right. The first question is, what do you feel is your highest and greatest responsibility on earth?
Love.
Ooh, love. Love it. What do you want as the ultimate outcome for your life?
I want people to say, he did good.
Mm. Yeah, this is right up your alley. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this. What do you consider true leadership to be?
Leadership from the heart. And again, I'll say it, people understanding that people work for money, but they'll die for respect and they'll die for recognition. But it's your responsibility to understand how they want to be respected. It's your responsibility to understand how they need to be recognized.
Mm, so true. So the last question deals with the fact that every single one of us will have a final day on this earth.
Yes.
I hope it's a long time from now for all of us.
Yes.
But what experience do you hope or want to have between now and dead?
That's a great question. Sitting with a comic book, eating my mom's German chocolate cake, listening to my father tell the same story about growing up in Tennessee.
Ooh, wow. There's a lot of that. That's a moment for you right there.
Absolutely. And I got a little choked up, man. I don't usually get choked up, but that would be if that's gonna be my last day on earth, then that's how I want to spend my last day.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. Jason, thank you for everything you've shared with us today, for the time and the knowledge and wisdom that you've shared with us, because I truly believe, and I'm serious, we need to put that on a bumper sticker. Inspiration from the past has been replaced by narcissism of today.
I love it.
And you've really helped us see. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing us a lot about who you are. It makes a huge difference.
Thank you, Dina. I'm going to say this to you, man, not just because I'm on your show. You are a fantastic interviewer, and you just leave it open for expression. So thank you. Fantastic.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm honored to have you on the show. Well, everybody, again, as you know, our goal here on Own Your Role podcast is just to help you introduce you into unique entrepreneurs, to help inspire you in some way. And I know I was inspired today, and I certainly know that many of you listening were too. So don't forget, the goal of the show is to spread the message to people who you believe can benefit from the message. Whatever message you heard today, whatever message inspired you, the ahas that you had listening to Jason, share it with those around you. They deserve to hear that message as well. And coming from you is the gift that you get to give to them. So thank you for being here today, everybody. Thank you for being a part of our audience. Don't forget to subscribe so you get notified when the next episode comes out. But for now, we'll see you on that next episode of Own Your Role.